I'll tell you just before we begin, let me just tell you a little bit about, Michael told you a little bit about my history. But my back history, back before, when we were all in our young 20s, right? I don't think anyone's in their young 20s. Maybe some of you are. But I was very involved in the civil rights and the anti-Vietnam War movements. And these were very important in shaping my understanding of the world and what was important and what I believe would lead to change for the betterment of people. And I say this because one of the things that's happened in the writing of this book is I have come to learn about a whole range of different movements and theorists and activities that were going on while I was doing this politics stuff. And actually, for many of us involved in politics, the connection between saving the world and saving oneself, in the early days, they were two different things. You had a choice. You could either do one or the other. But as the time went on, particularly in the 1970s, people began to say, wait a minute, aren't they one of the same thing? And don't we need to be okay as people in order to make any kind of change in the world? Okay, yes, and do ask me questions as I go along if you feel like it, okay? But I think that it's one of the things that's I can't initiate it because I didn't. It's fine. I think. Let me just share my screen, and then I can put this up and put this up here.
Oh, thank you. Very nice.
Okay. So what we're looking at now is APAC, this program. Okay, so we've inherited a very rich and complex and eclectic history. So first I should tell you the backstory on this just a bit. When I was asked to develop a coach training program at Fielding Graduate University, I looked at the programs and they were all how-to programs. How to coach, how to do this, and I thought, well, wait a minute, you could become a member of the Hair Cutters Union. This is a skill. Is there anything behind the skill? Is there any knowledge? Where does the skill come from? So I when I designed a book, a manual that we then turned into a book called the knowledge base of coaching. Each chapter summarizes a theory, and talks about how that theory influences or could be integrated into coaching. So instead of just talking about how to do this as opposed to how to do that, you're talking about what's the relationship between adult development and coaching. How do you understand people in different ways? I love it. There's a Jerry's. Yeah. And then how does humanist psychology affect coaching? How do you use CBT cleverly in coaching? What do you know about communication theory that would help you, or theories of change? So all of these theoretical underpinnings of coaching, very, very obvious, I think, are not only ways to understand coaching in a richer way, but they also become tools because you can use them. You can help um, give your client important and valuable information or ways of looking at things that that are really based on these theories. Okay, so I developed that, and then and I developed that coach. It was a graduate level coaching program at the University in Fielding in Santa Barbara, and we launched it, and it's been very successful since. Now, the more I went on in doing this work, the more I kept thinking, well, these are the guys that, this is the sort of foundational work. Was there anyone before that? I'm sort of a history buff by you know, I did an undergraduate in history. I kind of like that stuff. So I thought, well, what happened before that? And who did anyone know about this whole thing that we call coaching way before we got onto it? Okay, so this is when I began to look at this stuff, and this front page is a rich and eclectic history, and I don't know if you want to be bothered with any of them. The couple that I will just tell you is, this is William James, and if you look at William James, he was the brother of Henry James, who was an author in America. But this guy, William James, had what we would call, what Maslow would call peak experiences, what other people would call spiritual experience. He had experiences, and he had no place to go with it. This guy was in the early 1800s, or
Wow.
And so he writes these books, but he has obviously he has no community in which to begin to deal with this. Much later, but still early on in this, is Aldous Huxley, who wrote the book Brave New World, but also was extremely interested in this kind of stuff. So these guys are all, and you'll notice that they're predominantly men. And that's the way it goes back then. The two that I've included are the Myers-Briggs mother and daughter. And then this woman is Virginia Satir, who was very influential in talking about family systems, and we'll get to that in a bit. Okay, so this is these are the kinds of elements of coaching that I looked at. Now, this is not a complete list. I mean, because there are, the way I would put it is, there are thousands of good ways to coach within different kinds of theoretical assumptions, or using different kind of training. If you are an ICF certified coach, you need to make sure that you are following 11 core competencies. But outside of that, there's a huge big world that you can create as a trainer, and that you can create as a coach. Okay, so here's the first. Let's go on to the first one, and I want to make sure that I have time for questions. Okay, these are no, this isn't. Wait a minute. This is what I want to talk about. Okay, here's Sigmund Freud, and here's, I should point with my pointer. This is Freud, this is Carl Jung, and this is Eric Berne. And these are obviously Myers-Briggs. Okay, what we know is that up until really the 1950s, honest to goodness, maybe a little earlier with the body work guys, but up until the mid 19th century, all understanding of human behavior came from a Freudian understanding. And even though we don't practice this stuff anymore, most psychologists don't practice it anymore, Freud has entered the vocabulary. We know about a Freudian slip. We know about projection. We know about childhood behavior as having some, or infant behavior as some influence on how people function. So there is, even though this whole process of lying on a couch and telling your whole life story doesn't seem to be popular at all anymore, he still has been very influential, I believe. Now, Jung came along, and Jung did, he rebelled against Freud, and we owe a lot to Jung. Jung understood something spiritual, though how he did that or how he put it into words was not all that clear. He also developed the whole understanding of midlife. And, excuse me, could you close the door? Thank you. And a midlife crisis and what that meant to people. Okay, so the other thing that Jung did, and the reason why Myers and Briggs are here, is Jung developed a typology about people. He only had 3 dimensions to the typology. Myers and Briggs added a 4th, and you have the MBTI assessment tool, which has been hugely used. Now, the interesting thing is these women developed it during the World War II to work with women to help figure out which women would work well together in the factories. It was a very practical development that happened. I don't think they ever envisioned what was going to happen in terms of MBTI, but there you go. The other thing is that whereas Jung had 3 typologies, they added a 4th. Now, they were very excited toward the end of Jung's life. He came to New York, and Isabel and Catherine were ecstatic. They were excited they were going to meet him. He was completely uninterested in MBTI.
Wow.
Had no use for it. So it's an interesting, just sort of take on that. The other thing I just want to say about Jung is Jung began to sit people up in a chair, and there are literally quotes from him that I have found where he says, I sit there and I let people talk, and lots of times they naturally help themselves. So, there is some way in which Jung is already onto this whole process that we have now inherited. It didn't look anything like that, but that's certainly one of the things he was saying. The second thing that I want to talk about is behavior modification or behavior. So the 2 earlier guys, which would be Watson and Skinner, what they did was, and this is now we're talking about the 1930s or the 20s, these guys tried to manipulate the environment to see if a person would change by manipulating the environment. So if you remember, they Skinner developed a Skinner box, which you put a baby in and see if you gave a baby no external reinforcement, what would it turn out like? I pity to think what the baby's like, but they were, and they did lots of experiments with animals and with humans in this attempt. The breakthrough really in terms of behavior thinking was Aaron Beck, and I'm pointing to him now, Albert Ellis, and then later David Burns, who popularized CBT. There's a CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, is really, I think, if you ask me what are the 2 tent poles of coaching, I would say humanist psychology with Carl Rogers and CBT. Because CBT is a way for relatively healthy people to make changes in their lives. Okay, and they can make changes, and it's quite straightforward. And these guys said, get up off the couch. You don't need to know about your past. What you need to know is how to alter your thinking or your behavior. Okay, so it was a very here and now process. There's a group of people in San Diego who I've heard speak who say, interestingly, that part of the reason that CBT became so important and so powerful was because people only had 10 paid for coaching sessions through their insurance. So if you have somebody who is a compulsive hand washer or an agoraphobic and can't get out of the house or whatever, and now you have only 10 sessions in which to make a change, they felt that CBT, they literally developed CBT out of the need to help people change with some rapidity. David Burns wrote a book called Feeling Good, very easy to cope with, very easy to read, and he really is all about, here are the kinds of things you can do if you're anxious. Here are the kinds of things to do if you're depressed. Here are the kinds of things to do if you fear dying. All of those sort of stuff like that. And he was part of that whole thing. And he's still around. Okay. Now, the self-help and human potential movement was really very interesting. And one of the things I did is I went way back. I went to the 1930s, and I went back to Napoleon Hill and Dale Carnegie. It was very interesting. Napoleon Hill had a book called Think and Grow Rich, which in the middle of the Depression sold a gazillion copies, you can imagine. And he actually was trying to help people feel better. Now, I don't, we could say that, Donald Trump is trying to help people feel better, but this guy was actually quite sincere in all that. And one of the things that he said, and actually it's Dale Carnegie who developed a whole model of thinking and working, which to this day still exists. Now, this is Carnegie in the 1930s, and I'm just going to read you something. This is right out of his training book. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Instead of condemning people, let's try to understand them. Let's try to figure out why they do what they do. That's a lot more profitable and intriguing than criticism, and it breeds sympathy, tolerance, and kindness. Wow. Now, this guy might as well have been talking about Keegan's levels of higher adult awareness. He actually was onto this kind of interesting way of thinking or talking.
And he was also very successful, right? For people who don't know, Dale Carnegie was a billionaire, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He was the one who created libraries and.
Well, here's the interesting thing. The Carnegie steel manufacturer, who was hugely rich and successful, was another guy.
Okay.
Dale Carnegie changed his name, the spelling of his name, to match the spelling of the rich guy's name. So there was a Carnegie Library and Carnegie this and that, and Dale Carnegie also, made money in his program, but he was ambitious in terms of all of that. So that, yes, there were two guys, interestingly enough. So good.
Okay.
Now, the other thing, and these two guys down here are Dr. Bob and Bill W. And I remember my mother, who was on a cruise, came back and said, who's Bill W? It always says on this cruise, meeting with Bill W.
Oh, AA, right.
It's all AA. Now, these guys.
Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yes, it's Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'll tell you, this program has been studied by organizational theorists forever, because it never dies.
Mm.
And it has been able to sustain. It does not build an empire. It does not corrupt things. It has been able to sustain itself over the world since the 1930s. And it, just at an organizational level, but on top of that, what these guys were really saying was, you need to take responsibility for yourself. You need to help other people. That in order to stay, they say in order to stay sober, but helping other people has all kinds of benefits too. And they also said you need to make sure that you're who you are, and your importance in terms of the world gets said.
Recognized.
Yeah, recognized.
Yeah.
And again,
and you need a sponsor.
Yeah. And again, all of that stuff has a lot. When we look at what we do as coaches, what are we doing? In my opinion, we're taking relatively healthy human beings and we're trying to figure out, help them make richer, fuller, more successful, more compassionate lives. So when you're looking at all this, it's important to see who came, and these guys are now in the 1930s. Okay? So that's the early self-help. Now, the humanist psychology and the human potential movement. This is Carl Rogers. This is Abraham Maslow. This is Werner Erhard, and this is Will Schutz. And and this little picture here is the Esalen Institute.
Right.
And I will tell you that during the 1960s, when I was, organizing picket lines around against discrimination against Black people and against the war in Vietnam, these people that were sitting up there in the hot tubs in Esalen, which was this Esalen, I'll tell you what it is still exists. It's a community, a retreat kind of for people, located in this absolutely gorgeous spot in Northern California, right on the edge of the water, okay? And people lived there and came there, and you can still go there. I don't think it has it's not the same as it was, but it's certainly, these guys were all there. So it's very important to know. You know that what Carl Rogers did was said, look, human beings are essentially healthy. And all we need to do is sit across from them and help them figure out how they can be more healthy or more fulfilled. Carl Rogers, I think, was probably magical. And if you've ever seen a video of him or anything, he really had a kind of magic where people did come to conclusions without any intersection from him. I don't feel like I'm Carl Rogers. And so I think that I need to be a clever coach in order to ask the kind of questions and deliver the kind of messages that help people grow. But these guys were all around, okay? And let me just see.
I'd love to hear about Erhard's contribution, because
Okay, well,
that.
Yeah, well, what Werner Erhard did, let me just see where this goes. Hold on. Oh, here, let's just go here for a minute. Here's Esalen, or at least a view from Esalen. As you can see, it is quite stunning. Here are all of the people that went through Esalen or were involved in Esalen. And it's a pretty astounding group of people. And I began to think, what is the role of collaboration in developing really interesting or powerful ideas? Because there they were. And of course, I've thought this in the past with the founding fathers in the United States, were all together and who developed the Declaration of Independence and then the Constitution. Okay, so I do, and there are other cases of this or other situations. Look at the Impressionist painters in the period of time. Anyway, but the point is that these guys were all around. What Werner Erhard did was he gobbled up, literally. He took every training that he could, both at Esalen. He took training in spirituality. He took training in Scientology. He took all of it. He put it together, and then what he essentially did is he took the same process, probably that some people had experienced at Esalen, and he put it in hotels, and he put the trainers in suits. And it became a way for middle class, middle road people, not hippies, remember this is the height of that kind of movement, and these people are sitting around in, some of them naked in hot tubs, and he put it in hotel rooms. My own experience of, let me just see, these are the spiritual guys. My own experience of Werner Erhard, I took Est in the 70s, and then later I took my child to Landmark. I think Landmark is wonderful. It's a kinder, gentler Est. And I will tell you that whatever problems you have or complaints or nervousness about Erhard, I mean, and there are many, because I think that having owned the company and all that stuff, he really, there's a lot of not illegal, but not clean way of functioning. He became a billionaire with this stuff. But what you experience when you go to Landmark is brilliant.
Oh.
So this guy had smarts, and that's what you have to do. I always caution people. I think it's particularly Landmark is a great program for 30-some kids, because it's really about taking responsibility for yourself and making it up with your parents, and not determining that something else has created you as a victim. Taking control of your own life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the spiritual guys. Now this is Eastern religion, and I'll just go through. This is Aldous Huxley when he was young, obviously. This is Alan Watts. This is Alan Watts. This is William James, and here's Carl Jung, also on the spiritual side. The bottom row is Allen Ginsberg, Ram Dass, Abraham Maslow, and Roberto Assagioli. Now, you probably don't know Assagioli. He and Maslow developed what you would now know as transpersonal psychology. So what does it mean to have psychology that actually sort of ascends to some spiritual experience too, or blends with some spiritual experience? And they developed a journal around this. The reason I added these guys is because, and they all had different ways of functioning. But when we work as coaches, increasingly, people want meaning in their lives. It's my experience. People want some way in which life makes sense, or life has a deeper meaning than they have known, particularly if they're in midlife. And increasingly, there's a whole business around spirituality. Mindfulness is what they call it. Harvard Business School is now talking about mindful business practice, So it has become much more fashionable. These guys were all kind of weird outcasts, or weird guys on the periphery. and they have now become much more
Accepted.
accepted in this whole thing. I will tell you that of all these guys, Ram Dass is in my opinion, is the most accessible, readable, because what is he translates ordinary English language into concepts of spiritual concepts. Okay, so we talked about this. And are there any questions at this point? Are there any questions like who's one of these people, or what's going on, or No?
Leni, I'm Siloan from Singapore.
Hi, Siloan.
I appreciate the historical background that you gave. I just want to mention one thing. The last thing that you mentioned, that people want meaning, I would include purpose. And today the trend is on mindfulness, being very aware of here and now, the current moment, etc. I would say all the traditions that you mentioned came from, let's say, Greek and Roman, okay? Including even Diogenes' bathtub. But the point I want to mention is we have a very rich tradition in the Far East due to the confluence of Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism. So although they don't talk about scientific language, for a long time, they have focused on purpose, meaning, what is reality. Instead of adding to knowledge, they talk about subtracting from knowledge so that you are not stressed, so that you are at peace with nature and with yourself. So I just wanted to those comments.
Well, I want to tell you, you've actually delivered part of what I was going to talk about, because I do believe that you're absolutely right, that some of the most important, I'll go back, some of the most important spiritual trends that have been happening in coaching have all come from the Far East. And they are ways in which people have been functioning for thousands of years. And like I said, somebody like Ram Dass is a great teacher because he knows what he talks, but he can also translate it into a language that is easier for people to understand. But this is, it's hardly, there are current spiritual teachers that are incredible, and they're out there, and including, of course, the Dalai Lama, who is just, very important to all of us. And I think increasingly, anything that helps people understand that there's a greater purpose in life helps them grow. And it may be also, and again, it may be really simply a function of age. When a young person who is just starting out wants a job, is trying to create a family or find a partner or has young children, it's a different time in their life. But pretty soon, this whole issue arises. So thank you. Thank you very much, Siloan. Okay, now, body. Now this is, again, not all of us do this kind of work and not all of us function this way, although one of the interesting things, when I teach this section on coaching and the body, people can really understand that even in a Zoom session, even on a telephone call, if you ask someone, you're feeling sad, where is the sadness in your body? Where is it? And you can help people, particularly people who are oriented to their bodies or connected, understand that. But at any rate, these three guys are helpful. Wilhelm Reich, came out of Eastern Europe. He was pursued by the Nazis. He came to America. He was also a difficult person, but on top of that, he was persecuted. He had something called an orgon machine, which was supposed to realign your body. He tried to sell it crossed state lines. He was put in jail because he refused to cooperate, and he died in prison in America. There are, and I know them myself, Reichian therapists to this day. Alexander Lowen, who's the guy in the middle on top of this woman in this kind of odd position, said that it isn't just to understand that it's in the body, but you need to connect at the moment the emotions with the body. So he was much more oriented to connecting emotions than Reich was. And he gets credited, I mean, a lot of people who do body work around this. Dan Siegel really was the first doctor and theorist to start talking about neuroscience. And I don't have a whole slide on neuroscience, which is partly because when I developed this, it wasn't that much of an issue, but there ought to be one. The importance about all this really is that it's sort of like, it's sort of like what Esalen was talking about. There's a group of people, I mean, he says it comes out of Rome and Greece. Actually, there's a group of people that come out of Eastern Europe. There's another group of people that are homegrown in America who get involved in all this countercultural stuff. And there's another group of people who are heavily influenced by what's happening in Asia and really bring Buddhism to and all of the Oriental disciplines to the West. And they need credit for all that. And we use it, we use it as coaches. Okay, last one. This is, I included groups in this whole thing because I think that when people are being coached, it's inevitable that people are talking about somebody at work or somebody in their family or on and on. The first group person was Kurt Lewin, and he developed ways in which group dynamics occur. Wilfred Bion sort of did the same, but he's from Britain, and he's very big in this country. Murray Bowen, this guy right here, one of the things that Murray Bowen did was he developed the concept of triangles. That's when Michael and I get together to talk and develop an intimacy on the basis of talking bad about Bev or somebody else, or Jury. So Michael and I do that, and then we talk about how we don't like Jury, and it develops an intimacy between the two of us. And Murray and Bowen said triangles exist in families, and of course they exist in companies all the time.
So is that the start of transactional analysis?
No, actually, the TA guy is Eric Byrne, and I'll talk about that.
Okay, sorry.
But Bowen really talked about the whole concept of triangulation, and it's so often when you work with someone in a company where this is going on, and the importance of helping people understand that it's not a clean way to gain intimacy. And many of us grew up with our mothers talking to one member of the family or another, and not in that same kind of stuff, Okay, Salvador Minuchin, that's this guy in the middle with his little grin on his face. He was amazing because he was a psychologist, but he was very involved with the world. Poor people, slums, terrible situations, and Minuchin kept talking about the relationship between basically a sociological system and his and his and his and people, and how you can't separate really the human being from the society. Virginia Satir talked about families and is just plain loving. There's nothing, she had love of families, and she worked well with families, and it was incredible, the work she did. And this is Gregory Bateson, who was married to Margaret Mead, and who developed the first understanding about organizations. Very brilliant man. And the last one here is Fritz Perls. And the thing about Fritz Perls is not really representing Gestalt. If you were to go to the Gestalt Institute, say in Cleveland, they wouldn't be talking about Fritz Perls as the founder of Gestalt. They would, and Gestalt really means the understanding of the whole person in the whole situation. And it's really just, it's all very good. I mean, again, like I said, it isn't like there are thousands of ways in which these guys practice, and thousands of ways in which we can adopt any of their stuff. Fritz Perls said, put your mother in the chair, talk to your mother, right? I went to a psychologist, what I now know was a good Gestalt psychologist early on, and he had me take my boyfriend and put him in my chair, and the boyfriend was in, and I was in the boyfriend's chair, and then we had to talk to each other. Different, and you can do this even with Zoom or all this stuff. It's very clever. What it is how do you understand how another person thinks? And one clever way to do it is by that. Okay, so what have we learned from this? And this is, I know this is a lot, I really do. Observation. Our history is long and complex. The essential framework of coaching derives from overlapping theories and traditions. New ways of thinking have been derived either from imitating an existing idea or from challenging it. Some of the most fertile learning moments in our history came through collaborative enterprises, or when one theorist learned or studied with another. Perhaps our greatest debt, Perhaps our greatest debt is to the theorists and practitioners who believed passionately that people could live richer and more fulfilled lives. And then here's a Huxley quote that I love. This is in the 1940s. There are a great many potentialities for rationality, for affection and kindness, for creativity, still lying latent in man. Okay. All right.
Leni, we have 15 minutes, so would this be a good time for you if we open it up to questions?
Yeah.
Would that be good?
I'm here.
Great.
I'm here. I know that I have sort of fed you a lot. I'll just an answer to your question, Michael. Okay. The transactional analysis person is a guy named Eric Byrne. Okay. And Eric Byrne wrote a book, I'm Okay, You're Okay, and all that. And and what Eric Byrne, and they were popularized book, but what Eric Byrne developed, which was quite, is really a Freudian type understanding of people and a way to use it, cleverly, by saying, here there are three roles: parent, adult, child. The minute you mix them up, the minute you're not talking adult to adult, but you're talking adult to parent or adult to child, you are in
dysfunction.
rough territory.
Yeah. And they're unconscious.
yeah, these are all techniques we can use as coaches.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
They're absolutely available in many ways. Is
Yeah.
there?
I'd love to open up the questions if anyone has. Here's
Yes,
a question in the text box.
Yep. This is Eliza. Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, from Singapore. Thank you so much for your thorough background research into the history of coaching. Very, very interesting to the key contributors. My question is, going forward, there's a lot being said about neurosciences and the idea of the science looking at how the brain works, etc. So can you tell us a little bit about the trend and the thinking about coaching in the areas of using neuroscience to understand behavior, understand mindsets and so forth? And the second question is also the use of technology as we go forward, because we are talking about cyborgs now, we are talking about artificial intelligence, etc. And perhaps what's going on in the US in terms of the trends towards using technology in coaching.
Yeah. Okay, great.
And there's another question that's related to that in the chat box from Cynthia. So you can just combine it together, I think. Based on these historical developments, what coaching trends do you see surfacing in the next decade?
Right. Well, it just seems to me that the most important thing that we can do is to teach ourselves different ways of thinking, all these guys had different ways of knowing people, of thinking about people, of analyzing people, of understanding people. And the more we know, being stuck in one system is not necessarily, my own feeling is it's not necessarily the right way to go. Because as you get more comfortable as a coach, one of the things you can do is you look at a client and you go, this client is totally in her body. I'm going to work by using some of the body techniques. Or this client is absolutely anxiety ridden. I'm going to talk about neuroscience with this. So anyway, that's harder, okay? So when you first learn, you learn different techniques and you keep learning them. And then as it opens up and you feel easier about it, one of the things you can do is really figure out how to use some of these different techniques. And different people use different things. Jenny Rogers, who is one of my favorite coaches and has written some of the best books on how to coach that are out there, she's a great fan of transactional analysis. She uses it a lot. And so what I did in the hidden history, the book on coaching that I wrote, the handbook on coaching, is I put a chapter in. She wrote a chapter on using TA as a basis, and I have a TA in there. I also have what's it called? Not neuroscience. NLP. Neuro-linguistic programming, even though I'm not a big fan of it because I think it can lend itself to manipulation. But back to the question, the neuroscience, what I would say about that is we don't have to become scientists. There are now at least 50 books on neuroscience. You'll go mad trying to figure those out, I think, or maybe I'd go mad, you wouldn't. What it really is about is that what we have learned in neuroscience is that this part, the amygdala, the part of the brain that we thought really didn't function, we now know controls much of what we do. So, quote, rational thinking really actually functions emotionally. So all you really want to do, I think, in coaching is to figure out how to help people understand that this is an emotional reaction, and that it's fine to have emotional reactions because that's what everyone does. This is not because you are a weak person or an emotional person or any of those things. This is because this is the way the brain functions, and it's absolutely fine. Part of what we do a lot, and I hope you do, I certainly, is you got to reassure people. They're not crazy. They're not wrong. They're not any of those things. They're really doing just fine. And I teach this immunity to change, which is I think a very complex and sophisticated way to understand about how to make change. But there's lots of change processes that can be effective too. Technology. Interesting what you said. I'm located in London, but I do almost all my coaching on Zoom. I want to see the person's face. To me, it's very hard to do something just on the phone. Lots of people don't, particularly the somatic coaching groups in America, are very insistent that the only way you can do decent coaching is face-to-face, because that's the only way you can see the body completely. Again, I think we have to make use of what's out there. I taught for most of my adult life in America. Most of my clients are in America. I have a program for ICF certification that depends on 3 days face-to-face, but then online teaching, and then also work on Zoom. And I can tell you that I have those people that take that program have a huge emotional connection to it. And it's not so much because of the 3 days. I will tell you this, I'm confident to tell you this. I can create an emotional experience online. And that's because I've been teaching this stuff since the mid-90s, and I know how to do it, how to make something alive, even though it's online. Anything else?
I'm just noticing we only have 5 minutes left, and there's some more questions on the chat box here.
Go ahead.
Well, are you okay staying a little bit longer? Maybe
Sure, I'm fine,
15 minutes.
Leni, I'm Siloan, again from Singapore. I have one question and one observation.
Great.
Those of us who want to be successful coaches, we are quite willing to invest money and time and effort to learn a particular school of coaching, whether it's appreciative inquiry, whether it's growth coaching, or Douglas Silby's evidence-based coaching, or these days mindfulness coaching. So what I want to say is some of these trends eventually become fads, and then they fade away. So what advice do you give to someone who has got limited time, limited financial resources, so as to integrate what that person learns into who that person is, what his values are, and what comfortable behavior he has learned and practiced?
Yeah, a very good question. Okay, this is probably one of the most important things that we have to keep remembering. You coaches, you were the instrument. There's no curriculum, particularly. There's nothing but you. Your ability to be someone who is both empathetic but doesn't invade a person or doesn't take on a person's issue, someone who has worked through some of their own issues, someone who is what we would call clear, a clear channel. Those are that's very important. So what I would say about all this, and I think you're right, there are some fads, and and some of them are better than others. But, you know, I mean, look, face it, coaching may be a fad. How many of you remember total quality management?
Yes.
No, that was it. You couldn't go to a company without being able to conduct something called total quality management. You don't hear about it anymore. There's a relationship between companies adding these things on as they get anxious about either employee engagement or profits going down or whatever. So all these new things keep coming up. I think that the main thing to do is to trust yourself in terms of this. Something like appreciative inquiry is a set of questions, and I've used it successfully with people, mainly because what's the nugget of something called appreciative inquiry? It's how to take a situation where people are feeling bad because something isn't going right and turn it into a positive process. Well, the first thing you do is ask them questions about what they do well. And then you can ask them questions about what the problem is. And that's really all that AI or appreciative inquiry is. But again, and you can teach yourself this stuff. Or you can email me and I'll give you any resources on this. I really, you know, I do know the resources. So I'm happy to take any kind of, if you've got a question that, you know, that in terms of all this, that's true. I also, you know, I do have a program that is, I think, both reasonable and it's efficient. It covers some of the deeper stuff, and it's cost efficient and time efficient, and it gives you ICF certification. I'm not here to sell the program, but if you're interested, you should email me or email Michael or let him know. And if you're interested in the book, I can give you the book for far less money. Michael said that Amazon's charging you $45. Mad, you know.
In Japan, at least. And thank you for that. And I can leave them your website and email address as well.
Thank you.
There was another question by Lorraine. She said,
sure.
How does, by the way, if anyone is not speaking, if you mute yourself, that'd be really helpful because there's a lot of scratchy noise. Okay. The question is, how does Christianity feature in the history of coaching, or does it?
Well, that's a good question. It seems to me, let me just stop sharing so we can see people. Okay, it seems to me that a person, the Christianity is a form of spirituality, and that if you can express Christianity as a way to understand and love and accept people, then that's just another route, just like Buddhism is a route, or Hinduism is a route, or any of the other processes. What? Yeah?
It's background noise. Someone's got their...
Oh, okay.
If you guys could please mute yourself, Lorraine and Shirley, if you guys could mute yourself, I'd appreciate that. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. That's helpful for that question.
Okay.
And then there's one other question here. This is from Shirley. There's a trend in some circles that argue that coaches need to be psychologists. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that really came out of Sydney and Tony Grant in Australia and those people. And
the question came from Australia too. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have no idea. So what I would say about that is there's been that argument for as long as I know.
Okay.
It's important to understand some of the psychological background around this stuff, because you can use it as a coach. It's not voodoo. And the most important thing also is to feel comfortable learning that. I mean, one of the things I do in the program that I teach this kind of stuff. What's humanist psychology? What's adult development theory? I mean, when you go to coach someone, if you know that that person is in a certain age group, what are the kinds of issues that adult development theorists say are the issues that would face that person at that point in time? So my own feeling is that if you can get good training and good work, you don't need to become a psychologist. I think that that's part of, I mean, I can't even begin to tell you, excuse me, the arguments or the fights that have happened around the ICF and around Tony Grant and around various other people. I will tell you that one of the and people want more information. They want to know things, and they want to be able to function successfully, and they want to be able to make a living. One of the things I tell people, and I think it's important, is the kind of work you are doing is like being a social worker or a therapist or a teacher. This kind of work, if you want to make a ton of money, the most important thing to do is to go into IT or something like that. Because one of the things that happens that I have seen in Britain is guys trying to make a lot of money with slipshod programs, and they don't work for people, because the people will pay to get the program, but then they can't get clients, or they can't develop a coaching profession. I will tell you, I'm very open to, I love collaboration. That's the one thing I should tell you and Michael. I love it. I'm very open to answering questions, to being, to having. I'm listening to someone.
Okay, I think I muted them. Okay.
And to be, and to be around to answer that kind of stuff. I think that one of the things I tell the people that I teach a lot is relax. Who you are is really powerful. Think about it. It's just you and another person. Okay? So the kind of influence you have is very great. It's not just, it's not about curriculum. Now, all the kinds of things the experience you have, the life you have lived, all of those things make you, I think, a richer coach. Doesn't mean you're going to go around explaining to everyone how your husband died or something, but you are going to know something about death of someone you loved, or about children growing up, or about the difficulties of young children, or about how to cope how to be a woman and cope in a predominantly male-dominated environment. So these are the kinds of things that you know these from your own work. And what you have to do, and this is part of being a good coach, but also part of what the ICF asks from you, is that you don't go around saying, well, I did this, or what I think this, or this is my opinion. But you talk about, there is some research on this. There are some ideas that you might look at that are like this. So you want to frame the way in which you help people expand their understanding in as neutral a language as you can. I hope that makes sense.
That's helpful, yeah. And again, there was a question about where do you see the trend in coaching? And I think, is it an integration of everything that you know and using that in service of the client?
Well, I love, that to me, that's just great fun, because it's all out there, and it's very helpful, and it's and I happen to, as my husband said, you went off the leash on this book. which is meaning. I'll just show you a picture. There's a bunch of flip notes in it, but I had so much fun looking at all these, and they really were. Some of them are really nutcase guys who began this whole movement. I will tell you that in America, where coaching began, really, all of the early coach trainers, almost all of them, were former EST trainers.
EST trainers,
all
okay.
Early people who started coaching.
Yeah.
And it had this kind of Estian flavor to it. Things have changed much more, but there's still a group of people who are very committed to Julio Olala and to the body work people.
Somatic, yeah.
Yeah, and there's another group that's committed to this, and they fight about all this. And the most important thing to know is that knowing a little bit of all of it is great, you know.
Right. So then again, getting to the trend. I mean, do you see any clear trends in the future? I'm seeing a lot more team coaching. I'm seeing a lot more like internal coaches for organizations.
Yes.
Having a systemic perspective.
Yeah. Yes, I've done a lot of coaching inside of organizations. I think that people want to use coaching. I just want to read from Shirley to everyone. Thank you. Okay, Kurt. Thanks. People want to use coaching because it is an effective way. Look, asking someone a question involves them in helping figure out the answer. All you have to do is teach managers how to ask questions.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. It's absolutely, I mean, and it's not hard.
So do you see that as a future trend?
Yeah. I think as one trend is that internally, that there'll be a lot of more training, and I've been doing it too, but everyone can think about designing a program where you're saying, look, to the company, look, you want more employee engagement, I've got a process you can do it. And I use the Oscar model, which you can find online, but I also could give you something. Again, I'm open to providing you with any information or anything you want. But you want an easy coaching model, which is the Oscar is a more elaborate grow model, and cleverer. It helps you help people figure out stuff. I will tell you this, honestly. In 10 years, I don't know what will happen. I really don't. And I can't, I mean, maybe I'm being crazy, you know, or nuts, but it's very weird about, I mean, one of the things that is important to know is that developing a niche, fostering a group of people that you've been working with and getting them to recommend people is very important. What happens in the ICF, if someone calls the ICF and says, I want to start a coaching school, right, an accredited coaching school, the ICF says, I'm sorry, we can't do that because we're going to be evaluating your school, and that's a conflict of interest. But you should call Leni Wildflower. So I have helped more organizations if you want to start a coaching school. I don't think that, I think that I'm not sure about Asia or Australia, but I think that certainly in America and probably in Britain, they've saturated the market in terms of coaches, and the people who, you know, so that's part of it too.
So we don't need more coaching schools.
I say it's going to go on and it's going to be wonderful. I think that I happen to think that this more spiritual notion about how to function and what makes a good life and what makes a meaningful life, it may be just my hope, but I think that's an absolutely incredible way to go? Because if you look at the world out there, what is it that's needed?
That's a great question to ask. Yeah.
What's the big political question that's needed?
Well, one thing, I mean, coming from a perspective from Tokyo, is time.
Yeah.
Everyone's busy. Can't talk. Gotta go. No time. No time.
Yeah. No time.
How do we create time? If we can create time for people, and I think we can through presence,
yeah,
that could be the future of coaching.
Fantastic. And time and the capacity to listen to other points of view.
Yeah.
I mean, look what we've got now. Look at America.
Yeah,
like,
Trump and Hillary.
I'm embarrassed. I mean, you can imagine living in London. Everybody comes to me and says, "What is this with your Republican candidate?" And I said, "Don't talk to me."
Right.
Yeah.
So one other point that I didn't bring up, someone had a question, Ramesh, about NLP. So, what is your issue around it? Don't you, if a coach is well grounded with their values and beliefs, don't you think they could use that tool effectively without manipulating? Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's, again, it's not, I don't think it's not deeply grounded in any kind of research or theoretical stuff. I don't know how these guys developed it, but it's a little slapdash.
I see. Okay.
They were two students at the University of California at Santa Cruz, and they said, "Hey, look, if we watch the way Virginia Satir does things and the way Carl Rogers, and we imitate it, then we can teach people how to imitate Carl Rogers and Virginia Satir," which doesn't, I mean, it doesn't turn out to be what's happened now with NLP, but that's the origin of it, quite honestly.
Interesting.
So it's, it makes you a little...
Yeah, suspect.
So in the real problem, the real issue is how to function with integrity and smarts in this field, because that's what we want to do as coaches.
Well, speaking, operating with integrity, I did say we would extend the call 15 minutes, and it's now 10:14. So I do want to have integrity with that. I really appreciate, your generosity, your time. I shared your website in the chat box. Is it also okay to share your email address for people if they want to reach out?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'll put that there.
I'm one of those people that will. You want to have a one-on-one Zoom conversation? I'll do it.
You. Appreciate that.
Okay.
I definitely
no ultra motives, nothing.
Yeah, I definitely sense that there's this a lot of you're wanting to give and contribute. I
do. It's so much fun. And, it's so freeing. It really is.
And I know you've got multiple projects that people can write you about, the Immunity to Change program, and
the Immunity to Change. I'm writing a book on coaching women in professions, and
awesome.
And it's been widely they'll produce it, but so it will be. It's fine, and the most important thing is it's really fun to connect with people and to learn about people and to be there. I'm hoping that there's a chance to be in your neck of the world.
That'd be great. We would love to have you here. Yeah, that'd be great.
At some point soon.
And we will share this presentation, the recording of this presentation, on our website for members. And is it okay to share your PowerPoint as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You have it, or you?
But if you send it to me, I can.
Yeah, I will do it. I will do it. Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
You guys are great. It was wonderful. Wonderful. Lots of love. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Leni.
Julie's there.
どうもありがとうございました。
ありがとうございます。
ありがとうございました。
How sweet it is to be loved by you. Thanks, Michael. You're welcome. Thank you, everybody. I think we did a good job. I think we covered all the questions. Thank you, Shirley. I can see you from your nose up. That was a good call, right? Can't hear you. You're still on mute. There we go. Okay, now you're off mute. Huh. I can't hear you. Strange. Can I say something now? Thank you, Ramesh. Thank you, Serena, Judy. Shirley, you want to try now? Can you say something, Shirley? Moshi Moshi. I don't. You're yeah, I can't hear you. But we can talk on Skype. Go to Skype.